I love Classic WoW, and I think that Classic WoW has been a pretty faithful representation of what we got originally with WoW back in 2004. But that doesn't mean it isn't without faults. Now, most of these faults are actually going to be in the version of WoW that we got in 2004 and simply being replicated into Classic WoW. And that is unavoidable for the purposes of making something nostalgic. Of course, you can have accuracy or you can make it better. Now, in the real world, they made it flawed and they brought out an expansion that addressed a lot of these issues. Now, I think that we're going to be getting a TBC Classic version, and I think that with it we will get the same improvements that we got back in the day. So I thought I'd make this video looking at 5 ways that I think TBC will improve upon the Classic experience, and I do appreciate that this is somewhat subjective, and therefore you may disagree with me, and that's absolutely fine. Let me know your opinions down below. But I have, for this list, tried to go with 5 options that I think not many people are going to disagree with, that are pretty much just better in every possible sense. Of course, there's always going to be someone out there that disagrees, but I have tried to keep this somewhat neutral so we can all enjoy the video. So let's dive in. So, at number 5, I've gone for class balance. Now, class balance in TBC is not fantastic, but if we compare it to Classic WoW, then it is leagues ahead. Honestly, Classic WoW is one of the most unbalanced games, class by class, that there has ever been, in my opinion. It is absolutely shocking in terms of representation of classes across the board. Of course, you have some people who are diehard fans who will play what they want to play, and that's fantastic that they can find enjoyment in it. But if you are looking for simply being able to compete with your competitors, if you have some of the best players in the world on some of the worst classes, they're going to do worse in Classic WoW than people who basically just maul their buttons. And that is something that is going to be improved upon in TBC. Personally, I think that it is improved upon to a standard where we can say that TBC is somewhat balanced, whereas in Classic it just quite frankly isn't. A lot of specs that people do enjoy are going to be made actually viable in TBC compared to in Classic. For example, Shadow Priest and Boomkin are the most notable, where you simply don't see them existing in Classic, at least not in high-end PvE content. But you can slot one in TBC if you should so desire. They're still not going to be the top tier, but they now work at least, and that is a big improvement and why it comes in at number 5. Now, moving on to number 4 is honestly the one that I'm most personally excited for. I'm excited for pretty much everything on this list, but the fact that I'm going to be able to be a viable gold farmer and not have to play a mage. Mage AoE grinding is, in my opinion, the worst thing that there is in Classic WoW. I'm not saying that it's not how it was back in the day if people knew what they were doing, or even that it is inherently a bad thing, but what I don't like is the fact that they have a complete monopoly on making gold. You can make gold with other classes, you can use professions, of course you can, but you aren't going to be able to compete on the same tier of gold making potential as someone who has access and the skill required to be able to farm efficiently with AoE on a mage. The farms in Classic have been done to death, but even things as basic as a Zul'Farrak farm can net you a massive amount of gold while leveling at a low level compared to the amount of gold that someone can make playing at a high level on a max rank character that is not a mage. Now, that is something that I absolutely cannot wait to see go. I did unfortunately level a mage. I gave in to the pressure of having to do so in Classic to maintain a financial stability, but I do regret it, and I'm never going to be playing the mage again. I've never enjoyed it, and from here on forward I won't have to play one, and that is something that's very exciting to me. So maybe a bit of personal bias in here, but I think many people are going to be happy to see the massive gold farming monopoly that is going on from mages disappear and become a thing of the past.
You are not prepared!
Now, in at number 3 we have content gating. Now, content gating is present in every version of WoW we've ever had, but the methodology does vary, so I suppose it's more the methodology of the content gating that we're going to be discussing here. Now, in Classic, we have the release of raids in a phase system and we simply just have to wait to the weekly reset of the date that we're getting the new raid, and then the raid is available and you can enjoy that content. Now, that is the simplest method and also one that has a lot of perks to it. However, it does have its limitations, most notably being that drop off when you know when the next raid is coming is going to be very high in the weeks preceding it, and as a result it means that a lot of people sort of disconnect with the game. In TBC, originally, there was the trialling of a new system by which all of the content, or at least the vast majority of the content, was available from day one on the expansion's release. Now, the reason that TBC's content wasn't completed in a day back when it first originally came out is because the fact that a lot of this content was gated behind an attunement system that required you to have completed the content that came before it. Now, this is something that doesn't sound overly complicated, but it's actually something that was delivered in a very impressive manner with TBC, and it actually resulted in new content being released before the world first kill of the previously released content was actually ever achieved back in the day. Now, of course, with times progressing and people getting better at video games in general and having access to all of the information that we do, that we won't be seeing that happen again, but this will be somewhat interesting if Blizzard elect to keep true to how things originally came out when the TBC expansion was first released. Most notably being because of the fact that you will have a lot of guilds that are completing the entirety of the content available in very little time. But that doesn't mean that everybody will be, and it will be a truer experience of what TBC was like if they stick to the original way of development and have all this content available day one, and you simply have to progress down a series of questlines and achievements to be able to access it. I think this is quite an engaging way of playing the game because it does mean that there is something to do all of the time, and if you are waiting for raid night, you can begin your rep grinds for attuning for the next part of the questline or something of that nature. And it just leads to the fact that TBC is going to be an all-round better game for playing throughout its lifetime as opposed to in stints on new content release, and that is why I've dropped it in at number 3. Now, sticking with the raiding theme, we are going to be seeing raid size changes as a dramatic sweeping statement for TBC comparative to Classic, and that's going to be taking my number 2 spot. Now, the reason this is so much better is simply because of organising 40 people, getting them into a raid is quite a challenge. Now, of course, a lot of people do manage it, and that's absolutely fine, and the content that is 40-man in Classic isn't always the most difficult, so a lot of the times if you only have, say, 38 people, or maybe a few less than that, you're still going to be able to clear it. Now, this was a big problem back in the day because of a wide variety of issues that don't exist now, like poor internet connections and things of that nature, but people still have a lot of other problems that prevent them from gathering 40 people together at a set time and date all of the time to be able to complete this content. This is something that was mitigated by the fact that while 25-mans and 20-man raids did exist back in Classic, they were the norm in TBC, with the occasional 10-man thrown in like Karazhan as well. This is going to be a big improvement for quality of life for people who just want to very casually put a raid together and get it done. A lot of times people were extremely frustrated in the vanilla experience because they weren't able to raid due to a lack of people, but in TBC that was massively reduced, and as a result I think is going to be a big dramatic change and a big dramatic improvement for TBC over Classic. Now, there are so many things I wanted to put on this list that haven't made the cut, but one notable honourable mention that I do want to throw in here is going to be the presence of Arena in TBC. I know it's something that a lot of people are looking forward to, because it just gives another endgame option for PvP players over just doing Battlegrounds, which can be repetitive and kind of awful in Classic, if I'm being very honest with you. It does come with its own myriad of problems, but it is a massive part of the game, and its presence is definitely, in my opinion, something that's going to drastically improve the game. So I wanted to give that one an honourable mention here before we dive into our number 1. But at number 1, we have probably the best aspect of TBC And it's not even an addition, it's a removal. And I am of course talking about world buffs. Now they aren't technically going away, but they are no longer of relevance, and that is something that I think is going to be absolutely fantastic for the experience of WoW. World buffs, in my opinion, are one of the worst things that ever happened in WoW, and I'm really glad that they got rid of them. The concept is fantastic, but the actual way in which they were delivered led to people simply feeling like they shouldn't be playing the game if they don't have world buffs, and they need to be logging in 2 hours before to get their world buffs before they go into raids, and there are so many groups that won't take people if they don't have their world buffs, which is just a shocker as far as the development of a game goes. You are literally inhibiting people's ability to partake in the game when they want to, because they weren't able to log in 2 hours prior to that, to stand around in a laggy nightmare of a capital city waiting for a world buff that they may not even get because of how many people are there trying to get it, because these world buffs actually did have limiters on how many people can get them, and a few times in Classic I have seen people not be able to pick up their buffs because of the amount of people there were that were trying to get them. That of course meant that if those people wanted to raid that night and they were in guilds that wouldn't allow them to come without the world buffs, they simply weren't able to play that night through no fault of their own, and that is absolutely shocking. So I cannot wait to see the end of world buffs, and that is why I've put it in here at number 1. But that's going to see out this video, guys. Like I say, there are many more things that I haven't mentioned in this video, and if there are any that you think that should have made this list, please let me know down below. But for now, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.